Welcome back to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into a really fascinating dynamic: how everyday people, like you and me, can deeply engage with complex, sacred texts without getting completely lost. I want you to imagine the Quran as this vast, incredibly beautiful landscape. Now, to navigate it safely and to really appreciate its depths, we need two things. First, a reliable map drawn by absolute experts. And second, a precise compass that we can actually hold in our own hands. Today, we're going to unpack exactly what that compass looks like and how you can use it. Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll start with the Quran, the layperson, and scholars. Then we'll look at what ayat muhkamat actually are, followed by how to detect them. We'll do a quick case study on the interpretation of fasting. And finally, we'll wrap up with building a safe foundation for reasoning. Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the Quran, the layperson, and scholars. You know, the source material kicks off with this incredibly empowering starting point. The Quran is open to absolutely everyone. Seriously, you don't have to be a lifelong theologian to seek understanding here. Whether you're a scientist looking through the lens of biology, maybe a mathematician analyzing complex patterns, or just an everyday layperson, which is often referred to as the Ummah, the text is right there for you. It's there to study, to understand, and to be inspired by. But okay, to explore safely, we really need some rules of the road. While personal inspiration is highly encouraged, we've got to have strict guardrails to prevent things from just turning into chaos. The source makes it crystal clear: lay people must not surpass the interpretative boundaries set by the ulama, the scholars. And why is that? Well, because overstepping those bounds usually leads to these out-of-context, overly liberal interpretations that honestly confuse rather than clarify. What we're aiming for is a beautiful synergy, where the Ummah and the ulama mutually inspire each other based on their own unique expertise. But we have to keep our self-awareness intact. Our limitations as everyday learners mean our insights, as valuable as they are, simply don't overrule centuries of established scholarly consensus.
Moving on to Section 2. What are ayat muhkamat?
So let's establish a mental anchor for the rest of this explainer. Ayat muhkamat refers to specific verses characterized by their absolute simplicity. I mean, they are straightforward, firm, and easily understood without any hidden meanings or ambiguity. When you read them, the core message just clicks immediately. This, right here, is your compass. And this framework isn't just some arbitrary thing scholars invented. It's directly rooted in the text of the Quran itself. Surah Ali Imran, verse 7 states, "In it are verses that are precise, the muhkamat. They are the foundation of the book, and others are unspecific, the mutashabihat." So the text actually acknowledges its own dual nature right there. You have the clear, foundational verses, and then the more complex, ambiguous ones. All right, Section 3. How to detect ayat muhkamah. So how do we actually find them? Well, the source material lays out this highly practical, three-step detection process that literally anyone can use. Step 1, just simply read the verse and form your basic understanding of it. Step 2, check the ulama's tafsir, which is the official scholarly interpretation of that exact verse. And step 3, look for a match. You're asking yourself, does my initial simple understanding actually align with the context and perspective provided by the scholars? And this perfectly illustrates the contrast. If your understanding and the scholar's interpretation align completely, like they are pointing in the exact same direction with the exact same context, boom, you have found an ayat muhkamat. It's a firm, clear verse. On the flip side, if you read a verse and the scholarly tafsir reveals a completely different meaning, taking you into diverging directions, metaphors, or deep theological ambiguities, well, you've encountered the mutashabihat. You've officially hit the complex terrain. But this naturally brings up a pretty crucial question, and it's one that happens all the time in real life. What if your initial interpretation matches the scholars perfectly, but as you dig into the specific practical details of the verse, things start to diverge?
That brings us perfectly to Section 4, Case Study, Interpretation of Fasting.
Let's break this concept down with a real-world example. Think about fasting. When we read verses about fasting, the core concept, that fasting is an act of worship where you reduce eating and drinking, is universally understood, right? Your understanding and the scholar's tafsir align perfectly. So that core concept is muhkamat. But what happens when we start asking how to fast? You know, the exact times, specific methods, the exceptions for things like travel or illness. That implementation part requires deep, nuanced scholarly debate, and it leads to divergent interpretations. Because of that, it falls squarely into the mutasabihat category. So the key takeaway here is recognizing exactly where that clear foundation ends and where the complex details begin. The Muhkamat gives us the what and the why, which are easy enough for us to grasp, but the complex how, that belongs to the scholars. Acknowledging this division really requires some humility. It requires us to be fully aware of our own limitations as laypeople, knowing when to step back, and comfortably handing the wheel over to the experts when the terrain gets a bit too tricky.
Finally, let's head into Section 5, a safe foundation for reasoning.
Relying on the Muhkamat creates an incredibly secure landscape for our minds to reason within. First of all, its sheer simplicity means you just won't get lost in the theological weeds. Second, because these verses are foundational, they absolutely do not contradict other clear verses. When you stack them all together, they build this robust web of comparative knowledge. You really start to see the bigger picture. And honestly, most importantly, having this solid, unambiguous foundation allows you to safely navigate and resolve the larger mysteries and polemics that you're going to encounter in life, simply because your core understanding is firmly anchored.
Now, as empowering as all of this is, the source material leaves us with one final, absolutely essential safety check. Continuous learning is a loop. It's not a straight line. Even when you're dealing with verses that seem incredibly simple and firm, human language can be tricky, right? Meanings can sometimes overlap. So the absolute safest path to independent learning is one that consistently circles back to the ulama's teachings. You explore, you find those clear meanings, and then you verify with the experts. It just ensures you never drift out of bounds.
We have covered a lot of ground today, from understanding our own limitations to really utilizing these clear verses as our navigational compass. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. How will you use the simplicity of the Muhkamat to safely guide your own lifelong journey of understanding the Quran? Keep your compass calibrated, respect the mapmakers, and never stop learning. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.